Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Joseph Emerson? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the alleged crime, then offer my analysis. Alaska Airlines is the fifth largest airline in North America. It is part of the Alaska Air Group. Along with its regional partners Horizon Air and SkyWest Airlines, the airline mostly connects cities on the west coast of the United States with various destinations in the US, Canada, and Mexico. The airline has a pretty good safety record, although on November 14, 2020, one of their planes struck and killed a bear while landing at a small airport in Alaska. No humans were injured, but the engine cowl of the plane was damaged. This incident only serves to underscore the reputation that bears have earned as notoriously poor at communicating with air traffic control. It's not clear which airline the bear was flying for. I'm going to guess Frontier Airlines, based on the slogan for Frontier, a whole different animal. In August of 2001, a man named Joseph David Emerson joined the Alaska Air Group as a Horizon Air first officer. Joseph had been born in Washington State. Since 2008, he lived in Pleasant Hill, California. He was married and had 2 sons. In June 2012, Joseph left Horizon Air and took a job with Virgin America. In 2016, Joseph became a first officer for Alaska Airlines because they acquired Virgin America. In 2019, he became a captain. Joseph was certified to fly a number of different aircraft, including the Airbus A320 and the Boeing 737. He maintained compliance with medical certifications. At no point during his career were his certifications denied, suspended, or revoked. Now moving to the timeline of the alleged crime. On October 22, 2023, Horizon Air Flight 2059 was scheduled to fly from Everett, Washington to San Francisco, California. The aircraft for this flight was an Embraer 175. It was designed for short to mid-range flights. It is 103 feet long and has a maximum takeoff weight of 89,000 pounds. By comparison, the popular Airbus A320 has a length of 123 feet and has a 170,000 pound maximum takeoff weight. This particular Embraer 175 had been delivered to the airline in June of 2023, so it was only 4 months old. Joseph was on this flight as a passenger. He was off duty and not certified to fly this model of aircraft. Including Joseph, there were 80 passengers on board the flight. There were also 4 crew members. Due to Joseph's status as an employee and as a pilot, he was seated in the jump seat in the cockpit of the aircraft. This is not unusual in the airline industry. According to an affidavit, here's what happened next on the flight. The 2 pilots, referred to in the affidavit as Pilot 1 and Pilot 2, spoke to Joseph as they sat in the cockpit. Pilot 1 had never met Joseph before this flight. During the initial stage of the flight, Pilot 1 had no indication that anything was wrong. Joseph talked to both pilots about the weather and about various types of aircraft. He mentioned that he had been working for the airline for several years. The conversation was described as casual. When the aircraft was approximately halfway between Astoria, Oregon, and Portland, Oregon, and flying at 31,000 feet, Joseph made an unusual and unexpected move. While seated in the jump seat, he threw his headset across the cockpit and said, quote, "I'm not okay," unquote. Pilot 2 responded by turning around and looking at Joseph. He saw that Joseph was reaching up and grabbing the red fire handles. Joseph was trying to pull the T-handles, which would have activated the aircraft fire suppression system. The system is designed to extinguish engine fires. It shuts off fuel to the engines as part of that process. Activating the system would reduce the thrust to 0, and the aircraft would behave like a large glider. The pilots wrestled with Joseph, which prevented him from pulling the handles all the way down and fully activating the engine shutoff. Pilot 2 declared an in-flight emergency and changed course to fly to Portland International Airport. Joseph resisted the pilot's efforts to stop him, This went on for about 25 to 30 seconds. At this point, Joseph stopped resisting. Pilot 1 directed Joseph to leave the cockpit, mostly for the trying to kill everybody on the plane part. Joseph complied with the command and left the cockpit. The time between when Joseph said he was not okay and when he left the cockpit was about 90 seconds. At this point, the flight attendants interacted with Joseph. He peacefully walked to the back of the aircraft and told one flight attendant that he, quote, just got kicked out of the flight deck, unquote. Joseph then said, quote, you need to cuff me right now or it's going to get bad, unquote. Flight attendants put Joseph in a flight attendant seat in the back of the aircraft before restraining his wrists in front of his body with flex handcuffs. As the aircraft was traveling to Portland, David attempted to grab the handle of the emergency exit. A flight attendant placed her hands on top of his hands and stopped him. She talked to Joseph in an effort to distract him. Another flight attendant said that Joseph made several statements, like he messed everything up and he tried to kill everybody. At one point, he produced his cell phone and appeared to be typing text messages. Joseph could be heard saying that he just put 84 people's lives at risk. At about 6:11 p.m., the plane landed and the police took Joseph into custody. He agreed to speak to police officers after being read his Miranda rights. Joseph told the police that he had not slept in 40 hours and was having a nervous breakdown. He felt tired and dehydrated. Joseph said that when he was sitting in the jump seat, it seemed like the pilots were not paying attention to what was going on. They didn't seem right. He admitted to pulling both emergency shutoff handles, claiming that he thought he was dreaming and he just wanted to wake up. Joseph started having feelings of depression about 6 months earlier. He admitted that he had used psychedelic mushrooms and that it was his first experience with them. Joseph appeared to take full responsibility for his behavior when he said, quote, I'm admitting to what I did. I'm not fighting any charges you want to bring against me, guys, unquote. In the state of Oregon, Joseph was charged with 83 counts of attempted murder, 83 counts of reckless endangerment, and 1 count of endangering an aircraft. He has also been charged with a federal crime, interfering with the flight crew. Oregon has mandatory minimum sentences for many serious crimes under a law that was passed in 1995. Attempted murder has a mandatory minimum of 7.5 years. If Joseph is convicted of all 83 counts, and he is ordered to serve his sentences consecutively, he will be in prison for at least 622.5 years, eligible for parole in the year 2646. When he is released, the world will be an unfamiliar place, although, at the rate things are going now, at least half of the current members of Congress will still be in office. As far as the federal charge of interfering with a flight crew, that carries a maximum sentence of 20 years. Joseph Emerson pleaded not guilty to all charges. Now moving to my analysis. Here are my thoughts on a few areas that stood out to me in this case. Item number 1. What would have happened if Joseph had successfully engaged the fire suppression system? In all likelihood, the pilots would have simply restarted the engines. The fire suppression system would cause a flameout, and pilots are trained on how to deal with that. If for some reason they were not able to restart the engines, they probably would have made an emergency landing. The glide ratio for an Embraer 175 is about 15-1. At 31,000 feet, the aircraft could glide for over 80 miles. They probably would have made it to an airport, although it would have been stressful for everybody involved. Now, of course, that doesn't take into account any additional trouble that Joseph may have caused. Like if he was successful in shutting down the engines, perhaps he would have attempted to interfere with other critical systems. Item number 2. The incident involving Joseph Emerson has highlighted the controversy around the psychedelic magic mushrooms. This is the substance that Joseph had just tried for the first time, according to his account. The key ingredient in magic mushrooms is psilocybin. In a strange twist, the state where Joseph was charged, Oregon, was the first state to legalize magic mushrooms. In the last few years, there has been a resurgence of interest in psychedelics for the treatment of mental health symptoms. Specifically, there is this theory that the substance can effectively treat anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Researchers have repeatedly expressed grave concerns about movements to decriminalize psychedelics, including magic mushrooms. They are concerned that expanding the use of the substances will lead to dramatic negative outcomes, which will encourage the government to react strongly, for instance, restricting all research on psychedelics. Essentially, the researchers are saying that quickly moving to decriminalize may end up backfiring. It will erase all the progress that has been made in studying psychedelics. Researchers have stressed that even if psychedelics were legalized, their use to treat mental health symptoms should be greatly restricted. Only people who have participated in traditional mental health counseling for an extensive period should be considered as candidates for psychedelic therapy. Unfortunately, many of the people interested in using psychedelics have not exhausted mental health counseling options. One of the major complaints they have is that traditional talk therapy is difficult and time-consuming. The hard work of psychotherapy may pay dividends with little or no side effects, but psychedelic advocates don't necessarily want to invest that type of work. From their perspective, psychedelics offer a quick and easy way to improve. In addition, several celebrities, including Joe Rogan, appear to support the idea of widespread psychedelic use. Item number 3, what are the negative consequences associated with the use of psilocybin? Here are just a few of the unpleasant outcomes which have been reported. Protracted psychosis, mental confusion, severe paranoia, panic and anxiety, feelings of depression, agitation, nausea and vomiting, impaired judgment, seizures, and apparently trying to murder passengers on commercial aircraft. 10% of people who use psilocybin reported that they placed themselves or others at risk of physical harm. There is no question that the substance is dangerous. Advocates for magic mushrooms have said things like, well, it's not like the sky is falling, but in this case, an airplane would have been falling. I think that would be bad enough to discourage use. Item number 4, what does justice look like in the case of Joseph Emerson? I can appreciate that Joseph was going through some mental health challenges and perhaps received bad information about magic mushrooms. Maybe he thought that substance use would be an expedient way to address his symptoms. The problem I have with Joseph's behavior is how he allegedly attempted to murder 83 innocent people. Unfortunately, when people become depressed, they sometimes want to spread that misery to others. In March of 2015, Germanwings Flight 9525 out of Barcelona was deliberately flown into the side of a mountain by a depressed co-pilot. I have a separate video on that case. The co-pilot had been diagnosed with possible psychosis just 2 weeks before he killed the 150 innocent people aboard the aircraft. This highlights the self-centeredness of these types of killers. Joseph Emerson was described as a family man and a nice guy. People who knew him couldn't imagine him trying to kill people. But being nice is not a defense for the alleged crime involved in this case. Substance use is not a defense either. I think that justice in this case would involve at least 20 years in prison and, of course, being permanently banned from boarding any type of aircraft. Now moving to my final thoughts. Protecting passengers from pilots with mental health symptoms is a difficult, if not impossible task. There's so much emphasis with air safety on the potential dangerousness of passengers that airlines forget about the pilots. No matter how this issue is addressed, I think it makes sense for airlines to make sure that pilots don't use substances before being in the cockpit. Alaska Airlines used to have a motto which read, "North of expected." Unless they want to change that motto to higher than expected, they need to find a better way to address pilot substance use. Those are my thoughts in the case of Joseph Emerson. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.